Tom's mind raced as he scanned the room for options. The back door. We'll slip out and find a way to get out of here. They hurried toward the back of the house, hearts pounding as the sound of footsteps drew closer. Quickly, Tom urged, throwing open the back door. They dashed into the darkness, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they raced away from the house, their lives hanging in the balance. They ran through the narrow alleys, the sounds of their pursuers echoing in the distance. Tom glanced back, fear gripping him as he realized they were gaining on them. "Keep going," he shouted, pushing Claire to run faster. As they weaved through the streets, Tom felt a surge of determination rising within him. They couldn't let fear control them. They had to fight back. After what felt like an eternity of running, they finally found themselves in an empty parking lot. Tom turned to Claire, breathing heavily. "We can't keep running forever," he said, the weight of their situation settling heavily on his shoulders. "What do we do?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "We stand our ground," Tom replied, determination blazing in his eyes. "When Jim arrives, we confront him. No more secrets." As they waited in the darkness, Tom's heart raced with anticipation and fear. He could feel the storm brewing around them, and he knew the confrontation with Jim would be pivotal. "Tom," Claire said softly, breaking the silence, "what if Jim doesn't understand?" "He has to," Tom replied, steeling himself for the inevitable clash. "We need answers, Claire. We can't keep running." As the wind howled and the sky darkened, the tension in the air grew thicker. Tom's heart raced, each second feeling like a lifetime, as they prepared for the confrontation ahead. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, and Tom's heart sank. It was Jim. "Tom, Claire," Jim called out, his voice laced with urgency. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "What do you mean it's not safe?" Tom shot back, anger boiling beneath the surface. "You've been hiding things from us. We deserve to know the truth." Jim's expression darkened, his eyes filled with concern. "You don't understand. There are forces at play that you can't comprehend. Then help us understand," Claire pleaded, her voice breaking with emotion. "We can't keep living in the dark." "I'm trying to protect you," Jim replied, desperation creeping into his tone. "You have no idea what we're up against." Tom stepped forward, fists clenched. "Then enlighten us. We've risked everything to find you. We deserve answers." The tension hung in the air, electric and charged. Tom could feel the weight of their unresolved issues bearing down on them, and he knew they were on the brink of a storm that could shatter everything they knew. "I can't explain everything right now," Jim said, his voice filled with urgency. "But you need to trust me. If they find you here..." Tom shook his head, frustration boiling over. "No more secrets, Jim. We can't keep living like this." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the distance, growing louder as dark figures emerged from the shadows. "Jim," Claire cried, fear gripping her heart. "We need to go." "Stay close," Jim urged, his eyes darting around as the danger closed in. As they turned to run, Tom felt a surge of anger and fear coursing through him. This was the moment of truth, an opportunity to confront everything they had been running from. With danger closing in, Tom knew they couldn't escape the inevitable confrontation. They were trapped in a web of secrets and lies, and the storm was about to break. "Jim, if you don't tell us the truth now, we'll never trust you again," Tom said, his voice filled with conviction. The rain began to fall, echoing the chaos inside Tom's mind. He knew they were standing on the precipice of disaster, and the answers they sought were just out of reach. As the darkness closed in, Tom felt the weight of their choices pressing down on him. They were caught in a whirlwind of danger and uncertainty, and the tension between them was palpable. With a storm raging outside and danger closing in, Tom, Claire, and Jim stood at the brink of chaos, the future uncertain and the truth hanging just out of reach. The night loomed over them, a harbinger of the chaos yet to unfold. Tom's heart raced, the sound of thunder echoing the turmoil within. The storm was about to break, and with it, everything would change. As the storm raged outside, Tom, Claire, and Jim stood at the edge of a precipice, both physically and emotionally. The pounding rain blurred the lines between fear and resolve, and their lives hung in the balance. With dark figures approaching and tensions rising, the atmosphere thickened with dread. "Jim," Tom demanded, his voice rising above the howling wind, "this isn't just about us anymore. We need to know what we're up against. If we don't have the truth, we're as good as dead." Jim's face was a mixture of urgency and dread. "I wish I could explain, but there are things you're not ready to hear." His eyes darted toward the shadows, where the dark figures loomed closer, their intentions unmistakably hostile. "Try us?" Claire insisted, stepping closer to Jim, her eyes pleading. "We can't keep hiding in the dark, waiting for the next threat to strike. If we're going to fight back, we need to know everything." Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed through the rain-soaked alley, freezing them in place. Tom instinctively grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her closer. The dark figures were no longer mere shadows. They were armed and dangerous, and they were closing in. As the thunder roared, drowning out their thoughts, a chilling realization struck Tom. The enemies they faced were not just after Jim. They were after the truth. He carried a truth that could unravel everything. Before Tom could voice his thoughts, Jim stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You need to trust me. Whatever you think you know, it's much bigger than any of us. There are layers to this danger, layers you can't begin to comprehend." Tom clenched his fists. "Then help us comprehend it. If we're going to survive, we need all the pieces of the puzzle." A flicker of movement caught Jim's eye, and without warning, he turned to the alley. "We don't have time for this. We have to move now." In a heartbeat, the three of them sprinted down the alley, hearts pounding, each step resonating with the urgency of their situation. The rain lashed against their faces, a harsh reminder of the danger they faced. Tom glanced back, the dark figures still pursuing them, their silhouettes merging with the storm. "Where do we go?" Claire shouted over the wind. "There's a warehouse a few blocks away," Jim replied, urgency lacing his words. "It's an old safe house. We can regroup there." As they sprinted, Tom's mind raced with thoughts of the confrontation they were about to face. Jim's secrets were now a liability, and the stakes had never been higher. The city felt like a maze of darkness, with threats lurking around every corner, and with each step they took, the tension grew, threatening to explode. As they reached the warehouse, Jim flung the heavy door open, allowing them to enter. The dimly lit space was filled with shadows, echoes of past struggles lingering in the air. The tension that enveloped them felt suffocating. "Lock the door," Jim ordered, his voice tense. Tom turned the heavy bolt, sealing them inside, but a sense of foreboding filled the room. "What now?" Claire asked, her eyes darting around the space. "We need to figure out what's going on," Tom replied, breathing heavily. "Jim, it's time to come clean." Jim hesitated, glancing at the door. "I'm not sure you're ready for this. If I tell you everything, you might not believe me." "Try us," Claire urged, her voice rising. "We can't keep running without answers." Jim took a deep breath, the weight of his secrets bearing down on him. "All right, but you have to understand the gravity of this. There are people, powerful people, who want something from me, something that could change everything. I was involved in something far more dangerous than you know." "What do you mean?" Tom pressed, urgency thrumming through him. Jim hesitated. "I worked for a clandestine organization. They deal in information, secrets, things that could topple governments and bring powerful individuals to their knees. When I tried to leave, they made it clear that there's no escaping their grip." Tom's heart raced. "So you brought us into this mess because you thought you could protect us?" "I didn't want you involved," Jim replied. desperation creeping into his tone. "I thought I could keep you safe, but it's too late. They know about you both. They're coming for you." Before Tom could respond, a loud bang reverberated through the warehouse, causing them all to jump. The door shook under the force of the impact, and they exchanged alarmed glances. "Jim," Claire gasped, her voice filled with dread. "What do we do?" "We fight," Jim said, adrenaline coursing through him. "We need to defend ourselves." As if on cue, the door burst open, and several masked figures stormed in, guns drawn, their intentions clear. "Get down," Tom shouted, instinctively pushing Claire behind him. Gunfire erupted, ricocheting off the concrete walls. Tom grabbed Claire, pulling her to the ground as bullets whizzed past them. Panic surged through him, but he fought to keep his focus. "Jim," Tom shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "What are we supposed to do?" "We need to get to the back exit," Jim yelled, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene. "Follow me." Tom led Claire through the maze of crates and shadows, trying to stay low. The sound of gunfire echoed around them, and the warehouse felt like a war zone. Every corner held the threat of death, and the weight of their choices loomed heavily. As they navigated through the chaos, Jim suddenly halted, his expression shifting. "Wait, we can't go this way." "What do you mean?" "We need to get out," Tom urged, confusion swirling in his mind. Jim's eyes darted around, realization dawning on him. "They're waiting for us. This isn't just a chance encounter. They've set a trap." Before Tom could respond, a loud crash echoed from behind them, and a figure emerged from the shadows, one that sent a chill down Tom's spine. "Jim," the figure said, voice cold and calculating, "you've led them right into our hands." "Anna," Jim growled, his face contorting with anger. "You betrayed us." Anna stepped forward, her demeanor calm amidst the chaos. "It was never personal, Jim. Just business. You should have known better than to think you could escape." Tom's mind raced. "You're part of this too. You're one of them." Anna smiled, a chilling expression that sent a wave of dread through Tom. "I've always been part of the bigger picture. And you, Tom, you've become a loose end that needs to be tied up." "No," Claire cried, stepping forward, defiance burning in her eyes. "We won't let you take us down." But as she spoke, Tom felt the weight of the situation crashing down on him. Betrayal was swirling in the air, thickening the tension, and he realized that the stakes had risen far beyond what he had imagined. "Jim, what did you do?" Tom asked, his voice low and steady, grappling with the magnitude of Jim's betrayal. "Did you really think you could keep us safe?" Jim's gaze hardened. "I thought I could shield you from the truth, but this is bigger than both of us. We have to fight back together." Suddenly, another wave of armed figures surged into the warehouse, surrounding them. Panic flared in Tom's chest, and he realized they were caught in a deadly crossfire of loyalty and betrayal. "Run!" Tom yelled, adrenaline coursing through him as he took Claire's hand, leading her deeper into the warehouse. As they darted through the maze of crates, gunfire echoed behind them, the sounds of chaos merging with their racing hearts. They had to escape, but the looming threat felt inescapable. As they reached a back exit, Tom's mind raced with questions. Who could they trust? How far did the conspiracy go? And would they be able to fight back against the forces closing in? They burst through the door, the storm raging outside, rain pelting them as they stumbled into the chaos of the alleyway. The world felt like a battleground, and they were at the mercy of forces beyond their control. But as they sprinted into the night, Tom felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. They wouldn't go down without a fight. They would uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of their pasts. As they raced away from the warehouse, Tom glanced back at Jim, their eyes locking in understanding. They were now united by a common goal, a fight against an unseen enemy that had infiltrated their lives. "Where do we go?" Claire shouted, urgency lacing her words. "Follow me," Jim replied, his voice steady. "I know a place. We'll regroup and figure out our next move." The rain pounded against them as they navigated through the dark streets, adrenaline fueling their steps. The shadows of danger lurked behind every corner, but with their resolve hardening, they were determined to turn the tide. As they neared a safe location, the ground beneath them trembled, an ominous sign of the chaos to come. Suddenly, the sound of approaching sirens pierced through the rain-soaked air. The city had awakened to the storm of their conflict, and with it came a new wave of danger. Tom's heart raced. "We need to move now." But before they could react, a black SUV skidded to a halt nearby. The doors flung open, and armed figures poured out, their intentions clear. "Get down!" Jim shouted, shoving Claire behind him as they prepared to defend themselves. As the first shots rang out, the world around them exploded in chaos. Tom felt his heart race. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the culmination of all their struggles. The stakes had never been higher, and the storm wasn't just outside, it was raging within them as well. With determination fueling their fight, they would confront the darkness together. Whatever it took, they would emerge from this storm, and the truth would finally see the light of day. The chaos unfolded around them. Tom's gaze met Claire's, a silent promise of survival amid the impending storm. But as the gunfire echoed through the night, they realized they were trapped in a deadly game, and the next move would determine their fate. As the gunfire erupted around them, Tom's heart raced, each beat echoing the urgency of their fight. The SUV's headlights pierced through the rain-soaked darkness, illuminating the armed figures approaching. It was now or never. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Jim, cover us!" Tom yelled, pushing Claire behind him. The adrenaline surged as he prepared to face the oncoming threat. "Stay low and move quickly," Jim shouted back, scanning the area for an escape route. "We can't let them surround us." Tom's mind raced, recalling every training session he had ever endured. He gripped Claire's hand tightly, drawing strength from her presence. They were in this together, and he wouldn't let fear dictate their fate. Suddenly, a loud explosion erupted from behind the SUV, sending debris flying. The armed figures were thrown off balance, momentarily disoriented. It was the opening they needed. "Now!" Jim shouted, and they bolted into action, sprinting toward the nearest alley, their instincts driving them forward. The sounds of chaos faded into the background as they focused on escape. As they turned the corner, Tom felt a surge of hope. They could make it if they could just reach the safe house that Jim had mentioned earlier. But just as they rounded the corner, Jim halted, eyes wide with horror. "No, they're blocking us off. We need to backtrack." The realization struck them like a thunderclap. The street was filled with more armed figures, their intent clear. They were trapped, cornered in a game they had never wanted to play. "Think," Tom urged, desperation creeping into his voice. "There has to be another way out." Jim shook his head, frustration evident. "We could fight our way through, but the odds are against us. We need a plan." Claire's voice pierced through the panic. "What about the rooftop? If we can get up there, we might find a way to escape." Tom felt a glimmer of hope at her suggestion. "The warehouse has access to the roof. If we can get there, we can figure out our next move." "Follow me," Jim shouted, leading the way back toward the warehouse entrance. They moved quickly, hearts pounding as they retraced their steps, ducking behind crates for cover as gunfire rang out once more. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere shifted. The chaos outside became a distant hum as they hurried toward the back staircase that led to the rooftop. "I'll go first," Jim said, moving quickly up the stairs, with Tom and Claire following closely behind. The adrenaline surged, propelling them onward as they reached the rooftop door. As they burst through the door, the storm's winds whipped around them, a stark reminder of the danger they faced. but the view from the rooftop offered them a moment of clarity. The city stretched out before them, illuminated by the flashes of lightning that illuminated the night sky. "We need to find a way down," Tom said, surveying their surroundings. "There's a fire escape on the opposite side." As they moved to the edge of the rooftop, they heard the sounds of their pursuers getting closer. "We have to hurry," Claire urged, glancing back at the doorway. Jim led the way down the fire escape, each step a race against time. Tom felt the weight of their situation settle over him, the gravity of their fight, and he knew they had to survive. But just as they reached the bottom, the echoes of footsteps grew louder. They were still being hunted. "Go! We can't let them catch us," Jim urged, taking Claire's hand and sprinting down the alley. Tom followed closely behind, their breaths heavy with exertion and fear. As they ran, Tom's mind raced with possibilities. Would they find allies in the chaos? Could they trust Jim, who had led them into danger? Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt in front of them. "Get in!" A voice shouted from the driver's seat. It was Anna, the woman who had once betrayed them. "Trust her?" Tom questioned, glancing at Claire and Jim, both of whom wore expressions of disbelief. "We don't have time," Jim yelled, pulling Tom toward the car. "It's our best shot." Reluctantly, they climbed into the back seat as Anna hit the gas, the tires screeching against the pavement. The city blurred past them, but their lives remained tangled in a web of uncertainty. "Why are you helping us?" Tom demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I was wrong about everything," Anna replied, glancing back at them. "I didn't realize the extent of the danger. I thought I could play both sides, but they don't forgive betrayal." As they sped through the city, Tom felt a flicker of hope ignite. Perhaps there was a way out. Perhaps they could survive this after all. But just as they turned a corner, they were met with another vehicle blocking the road. Armed figures emerged, weapons drawn. The storm outside intensified, matching the chaos inside the car. "Get out!" Anna shouted, veering the car to the side, trying to avoid the impending confrontation. Tom's heart raced. They were cornered again, and the storm was far from over. As the figures approached, the reality of their situation settled in a fight for survival, in a world filled with shadows. As they piled out of the car, Tom braced himself for the fight ahead. The rain poured down, soaking them to the bone, but he refused to let fear control him. "Stay close," Jim shouted, positioning himself in front of Claire and Tom as they faced the oncoming threat. As the armed figures closed in, Tom felt a surge of determination. He would not back down. They had come too far to let this be the end. Just then, the leader of the armed figures stepped forward, a man with an unmistakable presence, one that sent chills down Tom's spine. "Jim," he said, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "You've led them right to me." "Who are you?" Tom demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. The man laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the night. "You don't recognize me, do you? I'm the one you've been searching for, the one pulling the strings." The truth hit Tom like a punch to the gut. "You're behind all this." "Why?" "Power, my friend," the man replied, his eyes glinting with malice. "And now, I'll take what's mine." In that moment, Tom understood. This was not just about survival, it was about a battle for control, a fight that would determine their fate. "Fight!" Jim shouted, and they sprang into action as gunfire erupted once again. Tom and Claire moved as one, dodging bullets and weaving through the chaos. The rain continued to pour, each drop a reminder of the stakes at hand. As the fight unfolded, Tom's thoughts swirled with determination. They had to fight for their lives, but they also had to fight for the truth. The darkness wouldn't win, not without a fight. With every blow they exchanged, every step they took, Tom felt a shift within himself. They were no longer pawns in this deadly game. They were warriors, ready to reclaim their lives. As the battle raged, Anna found herself caught between the factions. The man who had once been her ally was now a threat, and she had to choose where her loyalty lay. "Get out of here," she shouted to Tom and Claire, desperation seeping into her voice. "I'll hold them off." "No," Tom shouted back, anger fueling his words. "You can't do this alone." But Anna's expression was resolute. "You have to trust me. I'll give you a chance to escape. Go." In that moment, Tom understood the weight of her sacrifice. They were all trapped in a web of deceit, and survival meant making impossible choices. With renewed determination, they charged forward, using the chaos to their advantage. They fought through the storm of bullets, determined to escape the grip of the powerful man who sought to control them. As they reached a moment of calm, Jim found himself face to face with the leader. "This ends now," he shouted, anger boiling over as he confronted the man who had manipulated them all. But just as Jim was about to strike, the man raised a gun, a smirk dancing on his lips. "You think you can stop me? I'm just getting started." Tom's heart raced, fear clenching his chest. But just as hope began to fade, Claire stepped forward, her expression fierce. "We're not afraid of you." The boldness of her words sent a ripple through the group. They were united, ready to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume them. In that pivotal moment, something shifted. Tom felt a surge of energy course through him, a resolve that pushed him forward. They would not let fear dictate their actions. They would take a stand against the darkness. With one final surge of strength, they charged at the armed figures, determination shining in their eyes. The storm raged around them, but they were ready to confront the tempest. Hours later, as dawn broke and the storm began to recede, the remaining armed figures had been apprehended. The rain washed away the remnants of the night, leaving a sense of clarity in its wake. They stood together, battered but unbroken. Tom looked at Jim and Claire, gratitude filling his heart. "We did it. We survived." "Barely," Claire replied, shaking her head in disbelief. "But we're alive." The sound of sirens filled the air as law enforcement arrived, their presence a reminder of the battle they had faced. As the dust settled, Tom knew their fight was far from over. The truth still loomed in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. As they made their way home, Tom felt a sense of purpose ignite within him. They had fought against overwhelming odds, but the journey had only just begun. The truth behind the storm was still out there, hidden among the debris of their lives. As dawn crept over the horizon, the storm clouds that had once loomed so ominously over the town began to dissipate. Tom, Claire, and Jim stood side by side in front of the old house, their clothes drenched from the rain, but their spirits somehow lighter than before. They had faced the storm, both literal and figurative, and survived. The police had taken away the remaining armed figures, the menacing presence that had terrorized them for hours. Yet, despite their victory, the battle still felt far from over. "I can't believe it's finally over," Claire muttered, her voice tinged with exhaustion. She turned to Tom, her eyes weary but relieved. Tom glanced at Jim, whose gaze was still fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for something else to emerge from the shadows. Jim had been the calm in their storm, the quiet strength that kept them moving forward when the odds seemed insurmountable. Tom knew he owed him everything. "It's not really over, is it?" Tom asked, more to himself than to the others. Jim broke his silence. "No, it's not. This was just the beginning." He turned to face Tom and Claire, the same grim determination that had carried them through the night still etched on his face. "We've survived the first battle, but the war is still ahead. Whoever was behind this storm, they're still out there." Back at Tom's house, the three of them gathered around the kitchen table, cups of hot coffee in hand. They needed to debrief, to make sense of the events that had unfolded over the last 24 hours. "Let's start with what we know," Jim began, his tone authoritative. The armed men were clearly hired, but by whom? Tom set his cup down, frustration flickering in his eyes. "We still don't know why we were targeted in the first place. The storm, the attack, it all feels too orchestrated to be random. Claire, always the practical one, chimed in. Maybe we weren't the primary targets. Maybe the storm was meant to cover something up, something bigger than us. Tom frowned. But what? Why us? Jim leaned back in his chair, the creak of the wood filling the silence. Maybe it's not about who you are, but what you represent. You've been digging into local corruption, Tom. You've uncovered things. And sometimes, when you uncover secrets, you make enemies without even knowing it. Tom's thoughts drifted back to the research he'd been doing over the last few months, the connections between local officials, shady land deals, and money laundering. It hadn't seemed all that serious at first, but now, the pieces were falling into place. The storm, Tom said slowly, as realization dawned on him. It wasn't just a freak weather event. It was planned. They used it as cover to eliminate anyone who might be a threat to their operation. Claire's eyes widened. But how could they control the weather like that? No one can predict storms with that kind of precision. Tom's mind raced. Maybe not predict it, but what if they had the technology to influence it? What if the storm was engineered? Jim raised an eyebrow. Weather manipulation? That's a bit far-fetched, don't you think? Tom shook his head. Not anymore. There have been rumors, studies, and if someone had the resources and the knowledge, they could use it to their advantage. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Tom's words sinking in. The trio spent the next few days piecing together the puzzle. As Tom delved deeper into the data he had collected, everything began to make sense. The storm had indeed been engineered, part of a covert operation designed to silence anyone who posed a threat to an expansive criminal network that operated in the shadows. Local government officials, businessmen, and even law enforcement were involved. They had created a perfect system of corruption, one where dissenters or whistleblowers would disappear under natural circumstances. The storm was their most powerful weapon, a force of nature that left no trace of foul play. We need evidence, Claire said firmly. We can't just go to the authorities with a theory about a weather-controlling conspiracy. Tom nodded. I'm close. I've found some suspicious financial transactions and coded messages that point to a group with advanced technology. I just need time. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that their enemies were already aware of their movements. Just as they were preparing to make their findings public, an unexpected betrayal threatened to derail everything. Jim, the man who had been their rock, their protector, had secrets of his own. Tom had suspected for a while that Jim knew more than he let on, but he had trusted him until now. It all came to light one evening when Jim disappeared for hours without a word. Tom, Claire, and Jim had made an agreement to stick together, to trust one another implicitly, but Jim's sudden absence raised alarms. When he finally returned, his demeanor was off, tense, guarded. Claire noticed first, her sharp intuition picking up on subtle cues in Jim's behavior. But it was Tom who discovered the truth. A laptop left unattended, an encrypted file that Jim thought he had hidden. Tom found it. The file contained information that tied Jim to the very people they had been fighting against. I didn't want you to find out this way, Jim said quietly when confronted. His face was drawn, filled with regret. You've been working for them this whole time? Claire's voice shook with anger and betrayal. Jim shook his head vehemently. No, I didn't know at first. They recruited me, said they were trying to protect the town, to fight corruption. I believed them, but then I saw what they were really doing, and I couldn't get out. Tom was livid. So, you were just playing us? All those times you risked your life, it was all part of the plan. Jim's eyes filled with remorse. No, I tried to help you, to protect you from the inside, but it's too late now. They're coming for all of us. The betrayal stung, but there was no time for anger. Jim's warning proved true. The storm had passed, but their enemies were regrouping, preparing for another strike. Tom, Claire, and Jim had no choice but to work together one last time, despite the mistrust that now festered between them. They fortified the house, preparing for what they knew would be their final stand. The odds were stacked against them, but they were determined to fight back, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. As night fell, the familiar roar of thunder echoed in the distance, but this time, it wasn't nature's doing. Another storm was coming, engineered by the same forces that had tried to wipe them out before. "We end this tonight," Tom said, his voice resolute. The tension in the air was palpable as they took their positions, waiting for the inevitable clash. The storm broke over the town once again, but this time they were ready. In the chaos of the battle, Jim found his moment of redemption. He had made terrible choices, but now he had a chance to make things right. When the attackers breached the perimeter, Jim charged into the fray, taking out the first wave of enemies with calculated precision. He had always been the most skilled among them, and now he used that skill to protect the people he had once betrayed. But redemption came at a cost. As Jim fought to hold off the attackers, he took a bullet meant for Claire. He fell to the ground, bleeding and gasping for breath, but there was no regret in his eyes. "Go," he whispered to Tom and Claire. "Finish this." Tom knelt beside him, gripping his hand. "We'll make sure they pay for this." "I promise." Jim smiled weakly. "That's all I need to hear." With that, Jim slipped away, his sacrifice etched into their hearts forever. After the battle, Tom and Claire managed to retrieve the evidence they needed. Jim's death had not been in vain. They uploaded the data to the cloud, sent it to every major news outlet, and even tipped off an international watchdog organization that specialized in exposing corruption. The evidence was undeniable, and within days, the criminal network that had orchestrated the storms was exposed. The public outcry was swift and fierce. Government officials were arrested, businesses were shut down, and those responsible for the deaths of countless innocent people were finally brought to justice. Tom and Claire watched it all unfold from the safety of their home, the weight of everything that had happened finally beginning to lift. They had fought, sacrificed, and survived. And now, they had won. Weeks passed, and the town began to rebuild. The scars of the storm would remain for years to come, but so would the lessons they had learned. Tom and Claire stood together on the hill, overlooking the town, watching the sun set on a new day. "We did it," Claire said quietly. "We exposed the truth." Tom nodded, his heart heavy but full. "We did, but it cost us." Jim's sacrifice weighed on them both, a reminder of the price they had paid for their victory. But it also served as a symbol of redemption, of the strength found in unity and courage. "We'll never forget him," Tom said, his voice soft but firm, "or what we've been through." Claire smiled faintly. "And we'll keep fighting for the truth, no matter what comes next." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town in a golden glow, Tom and Claire knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be new battles to fight, new truths to uncover. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The storm had passed, but the lessons they had learned, the value of trust, the importance of courage, the power of unity, would stay with them forever.